Ilara didn't flinch when the glass shattered. Not even when the sharp edge of the expensive crystal bounced and nicked her perfectly straight jawline. Giovanni Gio Rossi, the man who owned the entire coastline they stood on, was standing. That itself was a terrifying sight. Gio wasn't huge, but his tailored suit barely contained the dense muscle that came from a lifetime of getting what he wanted. His face, usually a mask of chilling indifference, was purple with rage. The intricate ink covering his arms seemed to pulse with his fury. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. The sound of his voice cutting through the high-end Italian chatter was worse than any shout. "You insolent, careless mistake," Gio spat, the words delivered in perfect, cold Italian. He grabbed the linen napkin on his table and threw it at Ilara's chest. "Shut the F***K up, you piece of garbage." The entire restaurant, filled with politicians, businessmen, and Gio's own silent, suited guards, went silent. They didn't look at Gio. They looked at Ilara, waiting for the tears, the apology, the immediate breakdown that signaled submission. But Ilara didn't cry. She didn't even look scared. Her eyes, usually warm brown, were now flat, clear, and cold, like polished stones. She looked down at the ruined table, then back at Gio's burning face. "Your father taught you better than that, Giovanni," she said, her voice a low, perfect contralto, still in Italian. She didn't wait for his reaction. With a grace that stunned everyone, she bent low, not to clean the mess, but to scoop up a handful of the ice scattered from the shattered glass. Gio's jaw was still hanging open in shock that anyone, let alone a waitress, dared to use his real name. Then Ilara stood up, took a step closer, and slammed the handful of ice, hard, right into the front of Gio's tailored silk pants, directly over his belt. The shock of the cold, the wet stain, and the sheer audacity was enough to make Gio flinch backward, a sound of pure surprise escaping his throat. Every single person in the restaurant saw it. She had publicly, intentionally, humiliated the most feared man in the region. She didn't run. She didn't apologize. She simply tossed the empty, dripping glass bucket onto the table, turned her back on the stunned Mafia boss, and walked toward the kitchen. Gio should have signaled his guard. He should have ended her life right there. Instead, the purple rage slowly drained from his face, replaced by a deadly stillness and a flicker of something dangerously close to fascination. Ilara walked into the kitchen, and it felt like she was walking through water. Her heart wasn't racing, it was slamming hard against her ribs, a drumbeat of pure adrenaline. The kitchen staff stared. The head chef, a man named Emilio who knew better than to ask questions, simply pointed to the back door. "Go," Emilio whispered, shoving a clean apron into her hands. "Now, before the car comes." Ilara didn't argue. She knew what came next. When someone like Gio Rossi was publicly shamed, the fallout wasn't an argument, it was an execution. She grabbed her small backpack from her locker, her fingers fumbling with the lock. She had to get out of the Amalfi Coast immediately. This wasn't a small town where you could hide. This was a small town owned by one man. She finally pulled the locker open. But the backpack wasn't inside. The blood drained from Ilara's face. She looked around the small locker room. Her phone, her wallet, and her entire savings, everything was gone. The only thing left was the single laminated staff ID she wore around her neck. No. Not now. She stood for 2 full seconds, feeling the cold, paralyzing grip of panic. She was trapped. She had committed the unforgivable sin, and now she had no car, no cash, and no identification to run. Back in the dining room, Gio Rossi was sitting down. He had taken his napkin and calmly dabbed at the melting ice on his pants. His guards, 2 hulking men named Luca and Matteo, stood frozen. They hadn't moved since the incident, waiting for the inevitable order. "Find her," Gio said, his voice now dangerously low, like the rumble of a distant engine. Matteo, the younger of the 2, stepped forward. "In the kitchen, boss. We'll bring her back to the office." Gio slowly put the napkin down and leaned back, his eyes fixed on the entrance to the kitchen. "No. Not to the office. Bring her to me. Alive. Unharmed. And make sure she knows she's not being arrested. She's being invited." Matteo hesitated. "But boss, what about the disrespect?" I said, find her. Gio cut him off, the air in the room suddenly thinning. She knows my father. She used my full name. And she didn't just insult me, she played a game. I want to know the rules. In the kitchen, Ilara was scrambling, flipping lockers open. The other staff had melted away, terrified of being caught near the epicenter of the boss's wrath. Emilio, the chef, was wiping down a counter, not making eye contact. Emilio, Ilara pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. Did you see who took my bag? I need my papers. Emilio didn't stop wiping. You think someone took it, Ilara? You think someone stole it? He dropped the cloth. It's gone. That means someone knew what you were going to do. And they made sure you couldn't leave. The revelation hit Ilara like a physical blow. This wasn't a random incident. Someone else was playing a game, too. Her eyes darted to the CCTV camera hanging crookedly in the corner. It was a cheap, fake dummy. The entire coast knows I can't leave. And whoever knew I'd fight him, they locked me in. She pushed past Emilio and sprinted toward the staff exit, the air thick with the smell of roasting garlic and imminent danger. She threw the door open, expecting a deserted alley. Instead, Luca and Matteo were standing there. Their expressions were neutral, almost polite. Ilara, Luca said, his voice surprisingly gentle, blocking the way with a casual lean against the wall. The boss is asking for you. He insists. Ilara's mind raced. Running was useless, they were faster, stronger, and the street was full of Gio's men. Fighting was suicide. But going back to the table, that felt like walking into a cage. She took a slow, deep breath, trying to steady the frantic pounding in her chest. She had planned for many scenarios, but not this. She had expected to insult him and disappear into the night with her bag. Now she had nothing but her wits. Is he going to kill me? Ilara asked, her voice steady. This wasn't courage. This was the discipline of years taking over. Matteo actually smiled, a cold, humorless expression. If he wanted you dead, you'd be dead already, in the alley, before you hit the door. He wants to talk about his father. His father. The name she had thrown out. It was a calculated risk, a desperate attempt to show him she wasn't just some scared server. But how did he know that was the hook? Fine, Ilara said, her eyes meeting Luca's. Lead the way. She walked back through the kitchen, the workers still pretending to be busy but stealing glances. She kept her back straight. She had lost the first round, the escape attempt, but the psychological war was just beginning. When she re-entered the dining room, the atmosphere was different. People were still eating, still talking, but the noise was forced. Everyone was watching. Gio hadn't moved. He was still seated, calm now, but with an intensity in his stare that felt like a physical weight. The wet spot on his pants was the only visible sign of her victory. She stopped 2 feet from his table. Luca and Matteo stood behind her, boxing her in. Sit, Gio ordered, pointing to the empty seat directly across from him. Ilara didn't sit. She stood, meeting his gaze. I'm staff. I don't sit with the customers. Especially not after I committed a public act of disrespect. A slow smile crept onto Gio's face. It didn't reach his eyes. You think this is still about respect? It stopped being about the glass the minute you spoke. Now, sit. We have history to discuss. Ilara sat down, careful not to wrinkle her uniform. She kept her hands folded neatly in her lap, hiding the slight tremor in her fingers. She knew what she had to do next. She had to take control of the narrative, or she was finished. You want to know how I know your father, the capo? Ilara said, leaning forward slightly, keeping her voice low so only he could hear. Gio didn't blink. I want to know why you brought up a dead man. I want to know why a waitress in a cheap dress knows details about my family's past, and I want to know why you embarrassed me in front of my city. Ilara let out a small, quiet laugh. It wasn't amusement. It was pure, contained fury. You called me trash, Giovanni, she whispered. And you expected me to accept it. But I'm not the one who nearly ruined his whole life by insulting a woman who held his darkest secret. Gio's body tensed. He slowly reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, polished silver key. It was the key to a small deposit box. He slid it across the white tablecloth. "That key opens a locker at the main train station," Gio said, his voice heavy with warning. "In that locker, you will find your bag. Your passport. Your savings. Everything. You take it. You get on a train tonight. And you never speak my name, or my father's name, again. This is my only act of mercy." Ilara looked at the key, then back at Gio. The offer was unbelievable. It was an admission that she had truly shocked him. It was a chance at freedom. She picked up the key. It was cool in her palm. "I appreciate your generosity," Ilara said, her voice rising slightly, ensuring the surrounding tables could hear her next words. "But I don't take charity from men who call women whores." She slowly opened her hand, and the silver key dropped onto the tablecloth. "I don't need my bag, Gio," she continued, her eyes locking onto his, a dangerous, arrogant challenge in them. "Because I'm not leaving. I'm taking your job." If you're enjoying this story and the crazy drama, hit that like button to keep this rivalry going, and subscribe too so you don't miss the next chapter. Gio Rossi stood alone in the dark restaurant, the silver key to freedom still abandoned on the white tablecloth. Luca and Matteo waited by the door, silent and confused. "She played me," Gio muttered, running a hand over the short, dark stubble on his jaw. "She threw away her chance to live free." "Why?" Matteo stepped forward. "Boss, we can still catch her." She went toward the staff parking. "She can't get far on foot." Gio didn't look at Matteo. He looked at the key. He had offered mercy, a rare thing for him, and she had thrown it back. Not just thrown it, but used it as a stepping stone to insult him again. "She said she's not leaving," Gio recalled, the memory of her cool, steady gaze sparking something dangerous inside him. "And she's taking my job." That wasn't a threat. That was a challenge. He finally picked up the key, turning the polished metal over in his fingers. "The girl doesn't have a history, Matteo. That means someone erased it. I need to know who. I need to know why she knows my father, Salvatore Rossi." Gio slid the key into his pocket. "Forget the chase. That's what she expects. I want everything. I want her tax filings, her school records, her medical history. I want to know where she buys her toothpaste." Luca, the older, wiser guard, stepped beside Matteo. "Boss, that's going to take time. It means reaching into official channels." Gio stared at them, his eyes glinting in the dark. "Time. She publicly humiliated me. My reputation is what keeps me alive. I have exactly 12 hours before the entire region starts whispering. Find out everything. And start with her name." The next morning, Ilara walked out of the staff housing, which was a small, dusty apartment building 3 blocks from the coastline. She looked exactly the same, disciplined, quiet, and wearing the same uniform. But now, the discipline felt like armor. She saw the black sedan immediately. It was parked 2 blocks away, but she recognized the tinted glass and the specific model that Gio Rossi favored. They weren't hiding. They were announcing their presence. "They're watching me. They didn't kill me. That means I won the first move." She knew the boss's guards wouldn't approach her in public. They needed her alive, and they needed to keep the drama contained. That was her advantage. She walked straight to the small, crowded local cafe instead of the restaurant. Inside, she sat at a corner table. 10 minutes later, a short man with a nervous twitch sat opposite her. His name was Marco, and he worked the night shift cleaning the Amalfi City records. "They're digging," Marco whispered, not touching the espresso the waitress brought. "Big time. They hit the local police records first. Then the city registry." Ilara lifted her coffee cup, taking a slow sip. "What did they find?" "Nothing," Marco said, shaking his head. "That's the problem. Her file, your file, it's clean. Too clean. The social security number is valid, but the records attached to it are 6 months old. It's like you popped up out of thin air." This was the first revelation. Someone had cleaned her past exactly as she had suspected. But who? What about the apartment? Ilara asked, her voice low. Lease is under a holding company, boss's company, Marco admitted, looking horrified. They rent the staff housing, Ilara. But the rental agreement for your specific unit. It's registered under a name I don't recognize. A dummy corporation in Rome. Someone made sure your housing wasn't tied directly to the restaurant. Ilara put her cup down. This was new information. Her apartment, her temporary hiding place, was tied to a separate, powerful operation. One that shielded her from Gio's direct control. And my official documents, she pressed. The birth certificate is real. The passport, too. But the date of issue on the passport. Marco leaned closer, his voice dropping to a panicked breath. It was issued 5 years ago, in Kingston, Jamaica. That's a huge discrepancy. Everyone knows you're Italian, or at least you speak it perfectly. This was the core secret. Ilara felt a tremor run down her spine, a physical reaction of fear that she quickly suppressed. Did they see the discrepancy? She asked, her heart starting to beat faster. Luca, the tall, quiet one, he saw it. He marked it as red flag, possible forgery. They're sending the passport details to Interpol now, but that takes 24 hours. Ilara stood up. She slid a thick wad of euros across the table to Marco. I need you to pull the records on the dummy corporation in Rome. I need a name. Marco stared at the money. Ilara, they'll kill me. They'll kill you anyway if they find out you met me, Ilara countered, her tone sharp. Now, go. I need a name by midnight. She walked out and straight toward the black sedan. Luca was leaning against the car door, smoking. He looked impassive. Morning, Ilara, Luca said, taking a slow puff. I need to speak to your boss, Ilara stated, ignoring his attempt at casual conversation. Luca raised an eyebrow. He's busy trying to figure out why a woman who claims to be Italian was issued a passport in Jamaica 5 years ago. He finds discrepancies very rude. Tell him I find people who steal my property very rude, Ilara snapped. I want my bag back. Luca smiled faintly. You threw away your key to the bag, remember? It's no longer about a bag, Ilara. It's about a ghost. And boss doesn't like ghosts haunting his city. This was the confrontation she needed. She took a step closer, forcing Luca to look down at her. My bag contained a handwritten note from Salvatore Rossi to his son, Ilara lied smoothly, planting a question that Gio would have to answer. A note that explains everything. I want it back, or I tell the city what kind of man he really was. And Gio won't get his job back. Luca's face went completely blank. He had been expecting her to beg for her life or demand her money. Not threaten to use the boss's dead father as leverage. Wait here, Luca ordered, tossing his cigarette into the street. He got into the black sedan and made a swift call. 5 minutes later, the car's window rolled down. Gio Rossi wasn't inside, but his voice came through the phone speaker, cold and demanding. You have 20 seconds to explain what you know about my father, Gio's voice echoed. Ilara knew this was the moment to reveal something significant. She leaned down, putting her mouth right next to the phone. I know that 2 years before you killed him, he bought a house in Jamaica for his mistress, Ilara revealed, her voice steady. And I know that mistress had a daughter who looked just like me. Silence hung in the air, thick and heavy. Then Gio's voice returned, but the coldness was replaced by a slow burn of absolute rage. That's a lie. My father had no mistress. Your father called her Anya, Ilara whispered into the phone. And if you want the proof, you'll meet me in the restaurant tonight. Alone. Or I'll send the proof to every competing family in Naples. The line went dead. Luca's expression was now terrified. He knew that the name Anya was the highest form of treason a son could utter. Ilara walked away, leaving Luca standing alone, his dramatic irony complete. He now knew the secret was far worse than a stolen identity. She didn't have her money, but she had just bought herself a seat at Gio's table again. She walked straight to her small, dusty apartment, fully aware that 2 blocks away, a Mafia boss was likely trembling with anger and confusion, thanks to her carefully planted lie. But the question remained, was Anya a lie? Or was she giving up a piece of the truth to survive the night? She opened the door to her apartment. It was dark inside. She reached for the light switch. A hand shot out of the darkness and grabbed her throat, slamming her against the wall before she could scream. "You shouldn't have gone back to the restaurant, Ilara." A voice hissed into her ear, deep and familiar. "You were supposed to run." The light flickered on, revealing the attacker. It wasn't one of Gio's men. It was the head chef, Emilio, his eyes wide and panicked, his grip strong enough to crush bone. "The name Anya is not for you to use," Emilio said, tightening his grip. "Who gave you that information?" Ilara's lungs burned. This was a major plot twist. The chef was involved. Emilio wasn't just a cook. And he was protecting the secret, not Gio. Ilara clawed weakly at his hand, her mind racing. This was not the end. She couldn't let it be. She used the last of her breath to gasp out a single, vital word, the word she knew would stop him dead. "Mother." Ilara's world dissolved into a ringing blackness as Emilio's grip tightened. She had used the word, mother, but the chef's face didn't soften. Instead, his eyes narrowed, and a flash of pure, cold fury replaced the panic. "Don't you dare," Emilio hissed, his breath hot on her face. "Don't you dare bring her into this. Not after you ruined everything." Ilara couldn't breathe. Her vision blurred. Her body, however, acted entirely on instinct. She wasn't fighting back to escape, she was fighting to survive. She slammed her heel down hard onto Emilio's foot, a calculated, trained strike. As he instinctively recoiled from the pain, his grip loosened for a split second. That was all she needed. Ilara dropped her weight, pivoted fast, and drove her elbow backward into his sternum, a move designed to incapacitate, not just hurt. Emilio gasped, stumbling back into the wall, clutching his chest. He was big, but she moved like a ghost. She didn't stay to fight. She shoved past him and sprinted toward the apartment's tiny balcony. She vaulted over the railing without hesitation, landing silently on the damp, dirt patch behind the building. She was out. But the question of Emilio and the name Anya now loomed larger than Gio's anger. Emilio stumbled to the balcony railing, coughing violently. He watched Ilara disappear into the early morning mist. He wasn't chasing her. He was terrified. Gio Rossi stood in his large, opulent office, the morning light slicing through the expensive Venetian blinds. He was holding a photograph. It was old, faded, and the edges were soft. It showed his father, Salvatore Rossi, standing on a beach, laughing, and next to him was a woman with vibrant dark hair, a woman Gio had never seen before. Luca stood silently in the background, nursing a bandaged hand, a small injury from his failed attempt to find Ilara that morning. "This photo," Gio said, his voice flat, dangerously quiet. "Luca, I pulled this from my father's locked safe this morning. I never knew this woman existed." "Boss," Luca started. "Matteo is running the facial recognition now, cross-checking every country, but it's an old picture. And we still can't find Ilara." Gio ignored him. "She said Anya. She said a mistress. She didn't guess, Luca. She knew. She knew a secret I kept buried in a safe that only I could open. Who is she?" Gio slammed the photo down onto the desk. She vanished from her apartment in the middle of the night. No cameras, no witnesses. She moves like someone who doesn't want to be seen. "A ghost, you said. Ghosts don't publicly humiliate capos unless they have protection." Luca shifted nervously. "We checked the gym records. She trains every day. Intense combat cardio. She moves too fast, boss. Like a trained operative." "Operative of who?" Gio scoffed. "If she was a rival family, she would have killed me. If she was police, I'd be in handcuffs. She wants my job. She wants access. And she knows my weakness, my father's shame." This was the new direction of the story. Ilara wasn't just a waitress. She was a highly trained individual with a direct link to Gio's most devastating family secret. The power had shifted from Gio to the mystery he couldn't solve. Meanwhile, Ilara was not hiding. She was moving with purpose through the crowded public market of the coastal city, weaving expertly through tourists and vendors. She was looking for Marco, the nervous records clerk. She found him near a fish stand, frantically packing his belongings into a worn duffel bag. "Marco," Ilara said, grabbing his arm. Marco jumped, dropping his bag. "Ilara. They know. They know I helped you. Luca was asking the vendors about me this morning. I'm running." "You can't run," Ilara insisted, pulling him into a shadowed doorway. "Gio will find you faster if you leave the city. Did you get the name?" Marco fumbled in his jacket and pulled out a single, crumpled piece of paper. His hand was trembling. "The Rome Corporation," Marco whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "It's a shell, but the director listed on the registration. The name is Lorenzo. Lorenzo Moretti." Ilara took the paper. Lorenzo Moretti. The name meant nothing to Gio. But to Ilara, it was a profound, dangerous revelation. The tension was building on a new level. "Thank you, Marco. Stay in the city. Change your route. I'll send money when I can." Marco nodded frantically and disappeared into the crowd. Ilara knew Lorenzo Moretti. He was one of Gio's oldest, most trusted advisors, a man everyone believed to be loyal. Lorenzo knew. "Lorenzo hid my background. Lorenzo stole my bag." The betrayal was monumental. This meant Gio had a viper right inside his inner circle, someone playing both sides of the game. And that someone was protecting Ilara. The dramatic irony was now intense. The audience knew who was betraying Gio, but the boss did not. Later that evening, in a secluded spot overlooking the churning sea, Ilara was waiting. She was wearing a simple, dark jacket and jeans. She wasn't armed, but her posture was sharp, alert, and ready for action. A sleek black car pulled up. It was Gio. He was alone. He stepped out of the car, looking tense and tired. He walked toward her, the sound of his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. The tattoos on his neck stood out sharply against his skin. "You called me here," Gio stated, stopping 10 feet away. "You ran from my men like a professional. You are not a waitress. You are a threat. Why?" Ilara crossed her arms. She looked smaller, but the power she radiated was immense. "I called you here because I'm giving you a chance to reclaim control," Ilara challenged. "That key you gave me. It was a test. And you failed. You tried to buy me off. A real boss would have killed me on the spot." "I hesitated because you used my father's name," Gio countered, his voice rising in anger. "Tell me about Anya. Now." "Anya was your father's life," Ilara stated simply. "She was his escape. He loved her, and he kept her secret from your mother and your whole family for 20 years. She paused, letting the weight of the revelation sink in. Gio was trembling now, a physical reaction to the emotional shock. "The day you found out," Ilara continued, planting another strategic question. "The day you and your soldiers raided their house on the coast, what did you do with her? Did you kill her, Gio? Or did she kill herself to protect the secret?" Gio staggered backward a step, his breath catching in his throat. "I didn't kill her," he yelled, the sound tearing across the silent coastline. "She was gone. The house was empty. We never found a body." "Then you didn't look hard enough," Ilara snapped. "Because she didn't leave. And neither did her daughter." Gio stared at her, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and dawning horror. "The Jamaican passport," he whispered, finally putting the pieces together. "The discrepancy. The daughter, you are the daughter." "My name is not Ilara," she confessed, a rush of cold relief washing over her. "It is Anya Rossi, and I am here to take what is mine. Starting with your seat." This was the major plot twist. She wasn't just Anya's daughter, she was Anya Rossi herself, assuming the identity of the dead mistress. This was a lie wrapped in the truth. Gio lunged toward her, pure volcanic fury pouring off him. He reached out to grab her, to shake the truth out of her. Ilara didn't flinch. She simply took a step back, and a figure emerged silently from the shadows behind Gio. It was Lorenzo Moretti, Gio's oldest advisor. Lorenzo moved with a frightening speed that belied his age. He clamped a thick hand over Gio's mouth and pressed a cold, hard object against the back of his neck. "Don't move, boss," Lorenzo whispered, his voice steady. "She told me you needed to be contained. She told me you would lose control." Gio's eyes widened in betrayal, staring at Ilara. "I told you I was taking your job, Giovanni," Ilara, or Anya, said, her voice now completely devoid of warmth. "I just needed a few hours to clean up the paperwork. And now that I know who killed my mother..." Suddenly, a loud, sharp snap echoed across the rocks. Lorenzo, standing directly behind Gio, collapsed instantly without a sound. Ilara stared in shock. She hadn't moved. Gio hadn't moved. The only person moving was a small, silent figure standing 20 yards away, framed by the moonlight, Emilio, the chef. He was holding a rifle with a silent scope. He was looking straight at Ilara, not at Gio. Emilio slowly raised the rifle higher, aiming directly between Ilara's eyes. The man who saved Gio just shot Ilara's ally. Now, the chef's real target is the woman he just helped save the Mafia boss. The silence after the shot was deafening, punctuated only by the waves crashing against the rocks below. Emilio, the chef, stood 20 yards away, the rifle steady in his hands, aimed directly at Ilara's head. Gio Rossi, still reeling from Lorenzo's betrayal and the revelation of Anya Rossi, was frozen, watching the scene unfold. His eyes darted between Ilara and Emilio, trying to understand. "Emilio," Ilara's voice cut through the tension, sharp and clear. "She didn't flinch, didn't try to run. You just killed your friend. My friend. Your fellow conspirator. Why?" Emilio's finger tightened on the trigger. He was weak, Ilara. He was going to expose everything. "You pushed too hard." The rifle's scope glinted in the moonlight. Ilara knew she had seconds. "You're not going to kill me, Emilio," Ilara stated, her voice calm, betraying no fear. "Because if you kill me, who takes down Gio? Who finishes what she started?" Emilio hesitated. The reference to her, presumably the original Anya, Gio's father's mistress, hit him hard. He lowered the rifle fractionally. That tiny movement was a lifeline. "His unraveling, Emilio," Ilara continued, pressing her advantage. "His lost. He doesn't know what's real. If you kill me, you leave him in charge. You leave his family to keep running things. Is that what she wanted?" Emilio slowly lowered the rifle completely. He stared at Ilara, his face a mask of conflict. The raw emotion on his face was clear. He was protecting a deeper, older secret than Ilara even knew. "Get out of here, Ilara," Emilio ordered, his voice thick with frustration. "Gio is yours. But don't you dare mention her name again. Not to me." He turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Lorenzo's body on the ground, and a stunned Gio Rossi alone with Ilara. Gio didn't look at Lorenzo's body. He looked at Ilara, his face a storm of confusion and fury. The woman he'd humiliated in his restaurant was now orchestrating betrayals and near-deaths around him. "What was that?" Gio demanded, his voice barely a whisper. "Emilio. The chef. He was with you. And he killed Lorenzo. For me." Ilara picked up a small, smooth stone from the ground, turning it over in her fingers. She was calmer than Gio, stronger. The power shift was evident. "Emilio works for a different ghost, Giovanni," Ilara explained, her voice devoid of any emotion. "He wanted you to suffer, but he didn't want you dead. Not yet. He killed Lorenzo because Lorenzo was protecting me. He thought Lorenzo was the greater threat to his master plan." This was a subtle, devastating humiliation. Gio was not just outsmarted. He was a pawn in a game he didn't even know existed, played by his own staff. "My plan was for Lorenzo to disable you," Ilara continued, her eyes locking onto Gio's. "To take you out of the picture so I could step in. Emilio ruined that. But he also just revealed that your entire inner circle is compromised. Think about it. Your trusted advisor was protecting me. Your chef is a trained assassin with a hidden agenda. And you, the great capo, just watched it happen." Gio's face went pale. The implications were immense. His entire organization was a sieve. The weakness was exposed, not just to Ilara, but potentially to anyone watching from the shadows. Who do you work for? Gio asked, the raw desperation in his voice a clear sign of his unraveling control. I told you, Ilara said with a cold smile. I work for the memory of Anya Rossi, and I'm taking your job. She turned and began walking away. Where are you going? Gio called after her, his voice hoarse. To spread the word, Ilara called back, not turning around. The capo of Amalfi just got taken out by a waitress, and his own chef saved him. The power has shifted, Giovanni. Your enemies will be calling by morning. She walked away, leaving Gio standing alone with the dead body of his trusted advisor. He had never been so publicly, profoundly humiliated. Luca and Matteo stood before Gio's desk. They hadn't touched Lorenzo's body, they had simply reported the incident. The rumors are already starting, boss, Luca reported, his face grim. The Contini family in Naples sent a gift basket with an anonymous card. It said, heard you had some trouble with the help. Perhaps you need new staff. Matteo slammed his fist on the desk. They're mocking you, boss. After everything. A waitress. How could she? She's not a waitress, Gio cut him off, his voice flat. He was staring at the photo of his father and Anya again. She's my father's ghost. And she just blew my world apart. Lorenzo. Emilio. All of them. Who else, Luca? This was the core of Gio's unraveling. He couldn't trust anyone. His lieutenants saw the depth of his vulnerability, his shock. His enemies were circling like sharks. The pressure was building, threatening to crush him. We need to find her, boss, Luca urged. And Emilio. We need answers. Before we lose everything. Gio looked up, his eyes hard. No. We do something else. We play her game. But we play it my way. He paused, then slammed his hand down on the desk, startling Luca and Matteo. She wants to take my job. Fine. Let her. But she's not taking it without a fight. And she doesn't know who she's really up against. This was a small moment of defiance, a spark of the old Gio, but it felt hollow. He was reacting to her, not leading. I want the records of every single property Salvatore Rossi owned in Jamaica, Gio ordered, his voice regaining some of its old authority. Every bank account. Every contact. If Anya Rossi is my father's legacy, then I'm going to find out what that legacy truly entails. Luca nodded, relieved to have an order, any order. And Ilara? The waitress? Ilara is dead, Gio said, a chilling resolve entering his voice. Her name is Anya Rossi. And if she claims to be my sister, then she's going to find out what happens to family traitors. Ilara was back in her small, dusty apartment. She had changed into a clean, simple dress, but her mind was racing. Emilio's betrayal, then his mercy, then his warning, it all pointed to something far more complex. She was staring at the crumpled piece of paper Marco had given her, Lorenzo Moretti. Now dead. Emilio killed Lorenzo because Lorenzo was protecting me. But Emilio also saved Gio. And then he aimed at me. What is his game? Ilara walked to a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard. She pulled out a small, worn leather-bound journal. It was old, the pages yellowed. She opened it carefully. On the first page, in elegant, swirling script, were the words, "My dearest Anya, my daughter." This was the journal of the original Anya. Ilara was not Anya Rossi, the daughter of the mistress. She was someone else entirely. The dramatic irony was now layered and complex. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. Suddenly, a small, faded photograph fell out from between the pages. It showed a young, smiling woman with dark, vibrant hair, holding a baby. The woman was the same one in Gio's secret photo, his father's mistress. But the baby in her arms was not Ilara. The baby had light, almost white blonde hair, and piercing blue eyes. Ilara stared at the photo, her breath catching in her throat. This was the real Anya Rossi, the daughter of Gio's father and his mistress. Impossible, Ilara whispered, a chill running down her spine. She was supposed to be dead. They told me she was dead. She remembered her own past, the years of training, the mission she had been given. She was sent to impersonate Anya Rossi, to destabilize Gio's empire, to uncover the truth about her own family, and to exact revenge. But if this baby, the real Anya Rossi, was alive, then Ilara wasn't Gio's enemy. She was just another pawn in a much bigger, much more dangerous game. The journal lay open, revealing a hidden truth that could destroy everything she believed about her past and her mission. Ilara is not Anya Rossi. The real Anya Rossi, the true daughter of Gio's father and his mistress, is alive and looks nothing like Ilara. Ilara's entire mission, her identity, and her carefully constructed revenge are built on a lie. This chapter needs to leverage the dramatic irony established in Chapter 4. Ilara is not the real Anya. Lorenzo was killed by Emilio, who now protects Gio, while focusing on Ilara's immediate danger and her revealing a new, monumental secret to Gio. The pacing will remain aggressive, focusing on the pursuit, the capture, and the stunning revelation. Ilara, now knowing her entire mission was built on a lie, moved with desperate speed. It was 1:45 a.m. She was deep inside the city's abandoned warehouse district, a restricted area controlled by organized crime. Not Gio's crime, but something darker, older. She wore dark clothing and moved silently, keeping to the deep shadows. She wasn't running from Gio. She was hunting the truth about the real Anya Rossi. Suddenly, a voice cut through the damp, cold air. It wasn't Italian. Kija no Yuyi. The phrase was Haitian Creole, a question demanding, "Where are you?" Ilara stopped dead. She immediately spun around, dropping into a low defensive posture, and responded instantly in the same language, her voice low and sharp. "Mwen I sit lane. I am here." That was the moment Gio Rossi stepped out of the shadow of a freight container. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in dark tactical gear, carrying a suppressed pistol, and his eyes were blazing with furious curiosity. Luca and Matteo were nowhere in sight. He had come alone. Haitian Creole. Gio scoffed, lowering his weapon slowly, though his entire body was coiled. 5 years ago, you get a passport in Jamaica. Now you're speaking the language of a crew that disappeared 10 years ago. You just keep adding new names to the mystery, Anya. Ilara's face, usually masked in discipline, showed pure shock. She didn't fear the gun. She feared the exposure. "How did you find me?" Ilara demanded, her voice still strained. "You move like a soldier, not a ghost," Gio said, taking a step closer. "And soldiers always go back to the supply line. This isn't just an old warehouse. This is where my father ran the illegal docking operations until he was almost killed 10 years ago. Now tell me, who were you?" The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the far end of the dock. Someone else was here. Ilara knew the game was over. Gio had outmaneuvered her. She took one last look at his determined, enraged face. The humiliation she had inflicted in the restaurant had successfully turned his fury into a calculated hunt. "If you want to live, Gio, you'll get behind that container," Ilara hissed, pointing to the rusted metal box he had just emerged from. "Now." "Why?" Gio challenged, raising his weapon again. "Because your little friend is here to save you." "Because he's not my friend," Ilara countered, her eyes wide with urgency. "He's the reason your father faked his own death 10 years ago." Gio didn't hesitate. He was a professional. He saw the genuine, raw fear in her eyes, a fear she hadn't shown even when facing a bullet from Emilio. He moved, slamming his back against the cold steel of the container. The figure who emerged was massive, dressed in an immaculate, expensive suit that seemed out of place in the derelict area. He carried himself with a quiet, menacing authority that made Gio's heart hammer against his ribs. Ilara stepped forward, away from the container where Gio was hidden. She started speaking again, not in Creole, but in an ancient-sounding, flawless Sicilian dialect Gio hadn't heard since his grandfather died. "Lu Vinituri ECCA. The seller is here." The massive man stopped, his face impassive. "I told you to wait until I contacted you, Isadora." Isadora. Gio's mind raced. Not Ilara. Not Anya. Isadora. "I couldn't wait, Ilara," Isadora said, her voice now completely cold and formal. "Gio Rossi is unraveling. He found the Jamaican passport. He knows about the house. The man looked unimpressed. The house is a decoy. The legacy is what matters. Did you get it? Ilara shook her head. Lorenzo was taken out. By the chef, Emilio. Lorenzo had the final transfer documents. The man's eyes flickered with annoyance, not surprise. Emilio again. That fool. This was the unbelievable reveal. The man Ilara was meeting wasn't a rival boss. He was speaking about Gio's father, Salvatore, as if he knew him intimately. And he wasn't angry about the murder of Lorenzo, just annoyed by the inconvenience. Gio risked a quick peek around the edge of the container. He focused on the massive man. The face was familiar, but older, scarred. Where had he seen him? The deal is still on, the man stated. You give me the key to the legacy, and I give you the proof of Gio's betrayal, the documents that tie him to the money laundering that killed his father. Ilara's heart pounded. She was negotiating Gio's fate with a man who could erase entire families. I need the location of the real Anya Rossi first, Ilara insisted, planting a key question. I need to know she's safe. You swore you would protect her. The man sighed, a sound of heavy frustration. You are obsessed with the girl, Isadora. She is nothing. A pawn. But fine. She's exactly where she always was. Where Salvatore hid her. He pulled out a heavy, folded map, a topographical chart of the Amalfi coast, faded with age. He pointed to a small, almost invisible island nestled in a forgotten cove. The small island off the coast of Capri, the man revealed. The one they call Isola dei Silenzi. She's been there, hidden in the old monastery, under the watchful eye of the nuns, since Salvatore sent her away. Gio's eyes widened. He knew that island. His family owned it, but it had been abandoned for generations. The real Anya Rossi, his half-sister, was hidden 20 miles from his home, under his own nose. This was the truth he didn't expect. The mystery wasn't just about revenge, it was about protecting a vulnerable family member hidden in plain sight. Now, the key, the man demanded, holding out his hand. Ilara reached into her pocket. She pulled out a simple, old copper key, unlike the polished silver one Gio had offered her. Here is the key to the legacy, Ilara said. The man smiled. Finally. He reached out to take the key. That was Gio's opportunity. He exploded from behind the container, pistol raised. Firmity. Stop, he roared, stepping into the open. Put your hands on your head. Or I swear to God, I'll put a bullet through both of you. The massive man didn't move. He simply turned his head slowly toward Gio. His eyes, cold and clear, locked onto Gio's. You grew up, Giovanni, the man said, still keeping his hand outstretched to Ilara. But you're still a fool. Ilara froze, the copper key hovering between her fingers. She looked at Gio, then at the man. Who are you? Gio demanded, trembling with rage and recognition. I know your face. Who are you? The man smiled, a terrifying, humorless expression. I am the man you should have feared more than your father, the man said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, chilling whisper. And then he spoke the name, the final, devastating truth that shattered Gio's entire world. I am your mother's brother, Giovanni. Uncle Vito. And I'm here to clean up the mess your father left. The man Gio fears, who is plotting the destruction of his empire, is not a rival boss or a foreign agent. He is Gio's maternal uncle, Uncle Vito. Ilara is working for a blood relative who wants to take over the family legacy, and Gio's own family is betraying him. Based on the explosive revelation that Uncle Vito is the mastermind and that Gio's half-sister, the real Anya, is alive and hidden, the next chapter must focus on the immediate, violent confrontation and the resulting confusion of Gio's betrayal. Gio Rossi stood paralyzed. His mother's brother. The man he hadn't seen in over 20 years, the one everyone claimed had died in a boating accident, was standing here, alive, plotting his downfall. Uncle Vito, Gio choked out, the name tasting like ash. You're dead. My mother cried for you. Vito laughed, a short, brutal sound that echoed in the empty warehouse. Your mother cried because she lost her leverage, Giovanni. not her brother. Gio's world was spinning. The betrayal wasn't just by a waitress or an advisor, it was by his own blood, the man meant to protect his mother's side of the family. Put the gun down, Gio, Vito ordered, his voice suddenly hard. You've lost. Isadora here has the key. Your empire is gone. Vito looked at Ilara, Isadora, his expression stern. Give him the key. Ilara hesitated, but she slowly held out the copper key to Gio. Gio didn't take it. He aimed his pistol directly at Vito's face. You show up after 20 years, you kill my father, you steal my sister, and you use a pawn to betray me, Gio spat, his rage finally overcoming the shock. You get one chance, Vito. Tell me what the legacy is, or I blow your head off. Vito simply shook his head, a look of disappointment washing over his face. Always the brute, never the strategist. He lunged. Not toward Gio, but toward Ilara. Gio fired instinctively. The shot missed Vito, shattering the window of a nearby shipping office. Vito slammed his body into Ilara, knocking the copper key out of her hand. Ilara screamed, not in pain, but in fury. The key, the legacy, skittered across the concrete floor and disappeared under a stack of old pallets. Idiot! Vito roared, kicking at Gio. You just ruined the only leverage you had. The abandoned warehouse immediately became a kill zone. Gio and Vito were not fighting like two crime lords. They were fighting like two angry brothers who knew exactly where the other hid his weaknesses. Vito was older, heavier, but possessed a cruel, efficient training Gio had never encountered. He moved like a tank, aiming to crush bone and end the fight instantly. Gio was younger, faster, relying on his adrenaline-fueled rage. Ilara didn't wait. She moved instantly toward the pile of pallets, frantically searching for the key. The key was the whole game. Vito caught Gio's arm, twisting it sharply. Gio roared, dropping his pistol. It clattered uselessly onto the concrete floor. You think you're a king, Giovanni? Vito grunted, slamming Gio's head against the container wall. You're a paper boy. Your father knew you were too weak to hold the real family fortune. Gio lashed out, driving his knee into Vito's groin. Vito gasped and stumbled back, clutching his side. What fortune? Gio gasped, struggling to catch his breath, his whole body trembling. We have the city. The city is debt. Vito yelled. The legacy is the gold. The real gold. Salvatore used the Jamaican connection to move billions in illegal gold. It's sitting in a Swiss vault, tied to a single name. Anya Rossi. This was the first unbelievable revelation. The legacy wasn't territory or a business, it was a vast, hidden gold fortune tied to his hidden half-sister. Meanwhile, Ilara found the key. It was jammed into a crack in the floor. She knelt, desperately trying to pry it loose, her heart racing faster than the fight. Vito saw her. Stop her. Get the key. Gio lunged past Vito, diving toward Ilara. He slammed his body over hers just as she managed to pull the copper key free. Give it to me. Gio demanded, pinning her to the ground. Ilara didn't fight him. She pressed the copper key hard into his palm, forcing him to take it. It's yours, Gio, she whispered, her voice strained. It proves the gold is real. Now listen. That key is worthless without the code. Vito was charging toward them, enraged. He saw the key transfer. The code is with the only man who still believes in the original family, Ilara shouted, speaking past Gio, aiming the information at both men. Emilio. The chef. He has the code to the vault. This was a major revelation. The chef, who just executed their ally, was the key to the entire fortune. Vito skidded to a stop, his eyes wide. He looked at Ilara, then at Gio, realizing the depth of the betrayal. You idiot! Vito screamed at Gio. She's giving you the chance. We need Emilio. Suddenly, the warehouse doors burst open, flooding the dock with the blinding light of a dozen headlights. Luca and Matteo, Gio's main bodyguards, were standing there, their weapons raised, backed by a dozen of Gio's men. Matteo saw Gio wrestling with Ilara on the ground, and Vito standing over them. He raised his gun toward Vito. Drop it, Vito. Matteo yelled. Or we fire. Vito didn't drop it. He turned and sprinted toward the water's edge, diving off the dock into the black, cold sea without hesitation. Gio pushed Ilara off him, clutching the copper key tightly. He stood up, covered in dust and sweat, his suit jacket torn. Don't shoot. Gio roared, waving his men down. Let him go. He's my family. Find Emilio. Find the chef. Luca and Matteo rushed to Gio's side, their faces pale with confusion. Boss, what? Luca started. He's my mother's brother, Gio explained, his voice ragged with emotion. He's alive. And he knows where my father hid €1 billion in gold. He's trying to steal my family's fortune. Now, find Emilio. He has the code. This was the height of the confusion. Gio's lieutenants were facing an impossible internal conflict. Their boss was in a blood feud with his own uncle, and they were hunting the chef they ate lunch with yesterday. Gio looked down at Ilara. She was still sitting on the ground, watching him with calm, intense eyes. You just handed me the key to my family's war chest, Gio said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. Why? Why did you help me and not him? Ilara slowly stood up, brushing the dirt off her clothes. She looked him straight in the eye, her expression now cold and calculating. She was no longer afraid. Because I didn't come here to kill you, Gio, Ilara confessed, her voice tight with suppressed anger and sadness. I came here to avenge my mother. Your father didn't kill her. He used her. And he used me. I was trained to expose you all. This was the significant revelation. Ilara's goal wasn't murder. It was revenge against Salvatore for a betrayal far deeper than murder. My real name isn't Ilara, and it's not Anya, she confessed, the truth finally tumbling out. My mother was the chef's wife. Emilio's wife. And Emilio thinks you killed her. Gio staggered back a step. The shock was monumental. Emilio, the chef, was the widower. And Ilara was his daughter. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with devastating clarity. So when Emilio shot Lorenzo, Gio whispered, finally understanding the layers of betrayal, he was protecting us. He wants me alive so I can take down Vito. Then he kills me. No, Ilara corrected, her eyes burning with tears, a physical reaction of deep, repressed sorrow. Emilio doesn't want you to kill Vito. Emilio wants you to give him the code. Then he will take the gold. And then he will kill both of you. Gio looked at the copper key in his hand, then at the frantic faces of his soldiers. He was alone, trapped between a vengeful uncle and a grieving, highly trained chef, who now held the code to the entire family fortune. He had to get to Emilio before anyone else did. Luca, Gio ordered, his voice cracking with exhaustion and fury. Get her in the car. She's coming with me. If she's Emilio's daughter, she's the only one who knows how he thinks. He pointed to the copper key in his hand. This is worthless without her help. He looked at Ilara, his eyes narrowed with a desperate, new kind of respect. Let's go find your father, Isadora, Gio said. And stop him from stealing my family's legacy. Ilara walked toward the car, but she stopped halfway, looking back at the abandoned dock. We have to go to Capri first, Gio, she said, her voice now firm and demanding. We need to save Anya. The pursuit of the gold and the code is suddenly delayed by a desperate mission to save Gio's half-sister, Anya, from the monastery on the isolated island. Gio has to choose between wealth and family, and the clock is ticking on both. The restaurant was quiet, locked down. Gio's private office, hidden behind the wine cellar, served as their temporary fortress. Gio was pacing. Ilara, Isadora, sat at his large, mahogany desk, tracing the copper key on a map of the Amalfi coast. Luca and Matteo stood guard at the reinforced door. The legacy, Gio muttered, still grappling with the word. Billions. And the code is with the chef. We need the code to open the vault, Ilara stated, her voice steady. And we need to get to Anya first. If Vito gets her, he controls the account. Gio slammed his fist on the desk. You think I don't know that? We go to Capri, we get caught by Vito's people. We stay here, Emilio comes for the key. We're trapped. Just then, a sickening sound of rending metal tore through the ceiling above them. It was a precise, professional breach, not an explosion, but a high-powered thermal lance cutting through the steel roof. Mafia cursed, raising his weapon toward the ceiling. It's the roof. They're cutting in. A dark, specialized flashbang grenade dropped through the hole, detonating instantly. The room filled with blinding light and a deafening, disorienting sound. Gio, blinded and reeling, grabbed Ilara's arm, pulling her violently toward the escape route, a hidden panel behind a tapestry. Move! Now! Gio roared. 4 figures dropped silently into the room, moving with military precision. They were masked, cloaked in black, and carried non-standard, silenced weapons. They weren't from a rival family. They were professionals. Gio shoved Ilara through the panel just as one of the attackers fired. The bullet whistled past his head, embedding itself in the tapestry. He dove in after her, slamming the thick panel shut. They were in a narrow, damp service tunnel. Gio scrambled to his feet, breathing heavily, the metallic tang of fear and adrenaline sharp in his mouth. Who are they? Gio demanded, his internal thoughts a storm of panic. These weren't common street thugs. These men were silent, fast, and aimed to kill. Ilara was already moving, ignoring his question. She pulled a small, silver stiletto from a hidden sheath in her sleeve, a weapon Gio hadn't known she possessed. Her training instantly shifted her from a strategist to a predator. They're not Vitos, Ilara hissed. Vito is loud. Emilio is surgical. These are cleaners. Suddenly, the steel access door at the end of the tunnel shuddered violently. They were trapped. Gio unholstered his pistol, covering the door. Matteo. Luca. Report. The only response was the dull, muffled sound of silenced gunshots from the office above. Gio's heart hammered a frantic rhythm. His men were being overwhelmed. Ilara took up a position beside him, her back flat against the cold, grimy wall, stiletto ready. They aren't here for the key or the gold, Ilara said, her eyes locked on the vibrating door. They're here for me. They know I failed. They want to eliminate the loose end. The metal door crumpled inward with a shriek of tortured steel. The leading attacker stepped through, his silenced rifle moving in a deadly arc. Gio fired twice. Both shots hit the attacker's body armor, staggering him but failing to stop him. The attacker didn't return fire at Gio. Instead, he snapped his head toward Ilara. Isadora. Ritorna a casa. Isadora. Return home, he yelled, his voice electronically distorted. This was the unbelievable reveal. They were speaking Italian now, but their message was a personal command, not an assassination order. They were her family, or the organization that claimed her. Gio understood instantly. The threat wasn't his power, it was her life. He was a distraction. Your home wants you back. Gio snarled at Ilara. Who the hell is your home? Ilara was trembling now, a physical reaction that betrayed her practiced composure. She lunged, not at the attacker with the rifle, but at his partner, who was following close behind. Her stiletto was a blur of motion, hitting the man's throat where the armor ended. He dropped, choking, clutching his neck. The rifleman turned, momentarily stunned by Ilara's ferocity. This was Gio's chance. He tackled Ilara, pulling her down and backward as the rifleman sprayed the tunnel with silent bullets. The bullets ripped into the wall, showering them with concrete dust. Gio shielded her with his own body. He felt the heat of the rounds, the wind they displaced, but he didn't move until the firing stopped. He was protecting the woman who wanted to destroy him because she was the only path to the gold. You idiot! Why are you protecting me? Ilara yelled, scrambling out from under him. Gio pushed himself up, grabbing the discarded rifle from the fallen attacker's hand. Because you're the only one who knows the final play. You die, and I'm left with a pretty key and a dead empire. He aimed the rifle at the tunnel entrance. Now, which way is out of this tomb? Ilara looked past Gio, her eyes fixated on the fallen man she had stabbed. The dying attacker's cloak had twisted, revealing a small, metallic symbol stitched onto his uniform, a stylized silver scorpion. Ilara's face went utterly white. The look wasn't fear of death, It was the chilling realization of a personal nightmare. "The Scorpion," she whispered, her voice barely audible, thick with terror and a deep, cutting sadness. "My mother didn't die in an accident. She was killed by them." She looked back at Gio, her eyes wide, a new, terrible conviction settling in. "This is not about the gold, Gio," she confessed, pressing the final, devastating piece of information. "My mother left me something before she died. She gave me the vault code. Emilio doesn't have it." Ilara Isadora reveals her mother gave her the vault code, meaning she is the ultimate key, making her the most hunted person in the city. The attackers are identified as the Scorpion, the organization that killed her mother. Their next move is now dictated by saving Anya on Capri, as it is the only way to lure out both Vito and the organization that wants her dead. Gio and Ilara Isadora exploded out of the service tunnel's exit door, which led directly into the restaurant's dimly lit alleyway. They didn't speak. They ran. Behind them, the muffled sounds of the Scorpion cleaners engaging Luca and Matteo confirmed their temporary escape had come at a heavy cost. Gio sprinted toward his idling black SUV, which Luca had conveniently left running. "The keys. Where are the keys?" Gio demanded, already tearing the door open. "I took them," Ilara snapped, pulling the keys from her pocket. She had stolen them while Gio was shielding her. She vaulted into the passenger seat before Gio could react. Gio slammed the driver's door shut, rage simmering beneath the panic. "You steal the key now. You are unbelievable." "I am the code, Giovanni," Ilara countered, her eyes hard. "You drive, or I walk. We are saving your sister, Anya, on Capri. Then we deal with the gold." Gio didn't argue. He knew she was right. He slammed the car into reverse, tires squealing as they sped out of the alleyway. As they reached the first corner, a massive delivery truck, moving with unnatural speed, suddenly swerved to block their path. Gio didn't hesitate. He didn't hit the brakes. He drove straight onto the sidewalk, narrowly missing a row of parked motorbikes, then cut back onto the main road, leaving the truck stranded and smoking. "Vito," Gio snarled, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. "He knew we'd run." "No," Ilara corrected, already scanning the surrounding buildings. "Vito is sloppy. This is the Scorpion. They're professionals. They hit fast, they hit hard, and they leave no witnesses." Gio risked a glance at her. She was scanning the rooftops with an intensity that made her beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "She moves like a woman who expects death at any moment," he thought, his internal assessment betraying the electric tension between them. "You know too much about them, Isadora," Gio challenged, pushing the SUV to 60 miles per hour. "Who are you really? Why did you let your mother die?" The anger that flashed in Ilara's eyes was raw, genuine. "They killed my mother because she refused to give them the code. She hid it, Gio. And then she trained me, for 2 years, to retrieve it and destroy them. That's why Emilio thought I was ready to take you out." This was a major revelation. Ilara's mother had secretly trained her before her death, turning her into a living weapon. Suddenly, a motorcycle pulled alongside the SUV. The rider, cloaked in black, raised a dark, compact weapon, a silenced submachine gun. "Down!" Ilara screamed. Gio slammed the wheel sideways, sending the SUV into a controlled skid. Ilara didn't wait. She grabbed the suppressed rifle Gio had taken from the warehouse, leaned out the passenger window, and fired a rapid, expert burst at the motorcycle's front tire. The bike spun violently, crashing into a lamppost. The Scorpion rider was thrown clear, sliding across the pavement. Gio slammed on the brakes, breathing heavily. "You just saved my life," he managed, staring at her wide-eyed. Ilara tossed the rifle onto the back seat. "We are even, Giovanni. Now drive." The port. The tension was thick, undeniable. They had just moved from antagonists to partners in survival, tied by the blood they had nearly spilled. As they sped through the dark port district, Gio kept glancing at Ilara. Her discipline was absolute, but he could see the slight trembling in her hands, the physical reaction of a woman who had just fought and won. "Why Capri?" Gio asked, pushing the need for strategy over his anger. Why did my father hide Anya in a monastery? Ilara pulled the faded map from Chapter 5 out of her jacket. The monastery on Isola dei Silenzi, Island of Silence. It's built on a natural cave system. Your father didn't hide his daughter there. He hid his vault there. Another revelation: the monastery wasn't a safe house, it was the location of the gold vault, hidden under the guise of an abandoned religious sanctuary. Anya is the key to the account, Ilara continued. But the vault itself is under the monastery. My mother's code opens the vault. Your sister opens the account. Gio felt a surge of cold hope. This meant the gold was close, but incredibly difficult to reach. They reached the private dock. Gio quickly paid a fisherman to take them across the dark water toward Capri. As the small boat cut through the waves, Ilara leaned back, finally allowing herself a moment of exhaustion. Your Uncle Vito, Ilara said, her voice softer now. He's my mother's brother, too. That's why he knows about the gold. They were siblings. He hates your father for destroying their family line. Gio stared at the dark coastline. So, he didn't just betray me. He betrayed his own sister's memory by trying to steal the gold himself. He saw the gold as the only way to exact revenge, Ilara sighed, closing her eyes. He doesn't care about Anya. He just wants the name off the account. Gio looked at the dark silhouette of the tiny island growing larger on the horizon. Isola dei Silenzi. Suddenly, the boat's engine sputtered and died. The fisherman cursed under his breath, scrambling to restart it. What is it? Gio demanded, grabbing his pistol. We hit something, the fisherman yelled, pointing back toward the dark water. A net. A steel net. The revelation was immediate. They were trapped in a preset snare. Before Gio could react, 3 high-powered lights snapped on from a nearby, larger speedboat. The boat was sleek, silent, and its deck was crowded with men in dark suits, Vito's crew. Welcome to Capri, Giovanni. Vito's voice boomed across the water. Did you bring the key? Vito raised a powerful hunting rifle. He didn't aim at Gio. He aimed at the tiny fishing boat's hull, right below the waterline. I'm taking the girl, Vito yelled. And then I'm going to save my niece, Anya, myself. If you don't throw that copper key overboard, I'll sink you right here. Ilara knew the plan. If they sank, the key would be lost forever. Gio would be caught. She had to save the legacy, even if it meant giving herself up. Gio! Ilara screamed, shoving him violently toward the water. Go! Take the key. I have the code. I'm the bait. As Gio staggered backward, Ilara leaped out of the boat herself, diving into the dark, freezing water, swimming hard toward Vito's boat. She was offering herself as a shield and a distraction. Vito laughed, a cold, triumphant sound. He lowered his rifle. Good girl, Isadora. Come home. Gio watched in horror as Ilara was pulled, dripping and exhausted, onto Vito's deck. He was helpless. He had the key, but she had the code and she was now a hostage. Suddenly, 2 more speedboats emerged from the darkness. They weren't Vito's. They were smaller, faster, and their passengers were wearing black, tactical gear. They weren't here for Gio. They were here for Ilara, the woman with the code. The Island of Silence was about to become a war zone. Ilara is a hostage on Vito's boat, heading toward the island where the real Anya is hidden. But before Vito can interrogate her, the Scorpion cleaners arrive, initiating a 3-way naval battle between Gio, pursuing, Vito, holding the code hostage, and the mysterious, professional assassins, hunting Ilara. Ilara, dripping wet and shivering, was dragged onto the deck of Vito's yacht. She was immediately surrounded by his armed men. Vito stood over her, the hunting rifle now discarded for a cold, satisfied smile. Welcome aboard, little niece, Vito sneered, his eyes glinting with victory. You just saved your cousin, Giovanni. What a wonderful family moment. Before Ilara could speak, the night exploded. The Scorpion cleaners' speedboats opened fire, not at Vito's men, but directly at the water around the yacht, creating massive, deafening plumes of spray. They were signaling, not attacking. Vito's men immediately scattered, raising their own weapons. Vito looked furious. Those fools. They want the code, not a fight. Ilara watched Gio's fishing boat, currently disabled, drifting quickly toward the escalating chaos. She knew the cleaner's target was her, and she had to use that fact to destroy Vito and save Gio. Vito! Ilara screamed over the growing noise. You don't understand. They don't want the code anymore. They want you. Vito laughed, a hard, cynical sound. They want the gold, girl. They know you have the code now. I don't have the code, Ilara said, her voice dropping to a low, powerful confession. She was finally telling the real truth. The code is in my memory, yes. But it's not my mother's. It's yours. Vito froze. His triumph vanished, replaced by a deep, guttural sound of confusion and fear. What are you saying? He demanded, grabbing her arm so hard she winced. I'm saying your sister, my mother, never had the code, Ilara explained, pushing back the tears, a physical reaction to the emotional trauma of the moment. She told me the truth before she died. The code for the gold vault was split into 3 parts. Salvatore had the key, Anya had the account name, and you, Vito, held the final sequence. This was the mind-blowing twist. Vito was not just the betrayer. He was the final piece of the legacy and had been hunted by the same organization that killed Ilara's mother. The dramatic irony was now crushing. When Salvatore found out the Scorpion was after the gold, he handed his mistress, your sister, the key to the account name, Anya Rossi, and gave you the final code, Ilara continued, her voice shaking with the realization of the complex trap. He knew you hated him, Vito. He knew you'd never give it to him. He used your hate to protect his fortune. Vito stumbled backward, his face grey. This meant the gold, his revenge, his entire life since he faked his death, had been predicated on a manipulation by the man he hated most. He was not the puppet master. He was the locked vault. That's why Emilio shot Lorenzo. Ilara shouted, connecting the last dots. Emilio knew Vito had the final code. He killed Lorenzo because Lorenzo was giving me to Vito, bringing the 3 pieces together. Vito's eyes darted wildly toward the Scorpion boats closing in. He realized the truth. The Scorpion cleaners weren't after the key or the account. They were here for Vito's memory. They would extract the code from him, violently, and then eliminate the witnesses. Suddenly, a loud blast erupted from the wreckage of the fishing boat. Gio, somehow freed from the entanglement, was standing on the deck of his disabled boat, holding a flare gun. He fired the flare directly over Vito's yacht. It burst into brilliant, searing white light. His signaling. Vito roared, terrified. They're going to use the light to fire. Kill the girl. Get the code. 2 of Vito's men rushed at Ilara. She didn't fight back. She knew the code was her only shield. The code is, it's the date. Ilara screamed, forcing the words out as the men grabbed her. The date Vito's sister, my mother, was born. October 10th, 1975. This was the final, devastating reveal of the chapter. She didn't have the code. She had the key to unlock Vito's memory. Vito screamed in pain and recognition. The code had been hidden in his grief, in the one date he could never forget. Stop! Vito shrieked, batting his men away from Ilara. Stop! It's real. It's the date. He looked at Ilara, his face contorted in agony. Why did you tell him, Isadora? Why did you tell Gio the date? Ilara looked past him, her eyes locking onto Gio, who was scrambling to get off his sinking boat. Because Gio knows the format. Ilara yelled. He knows the military format for dates. You don't. Vito's realization was complete and crippling. He had the number, but he didn't know the sequence, MMDI versus DDI, etc. He was still powerless. Gio was the only one who could use the code. Vito grabbed Ilara, using her as a shield as the Scorpion boats closed in. You'll tell me the format, girl. Or I swear I'll throw you to the sharks. The Scorpion boats, now within range, pulled alongside the yacht. The leader, a tall woman with cold, empty eyes, raised her hand. Vito Moretti, The leader's voice crackled across a loudspeaker. The organization has waited 20 years for the final sequence. You will surrender, or we will sink the yacht and cut it out of you. Vito held a shaking gun to Ilara's temple, his body trembling with the realization that he was the prey. Everything he had done, the feigned death, the waiting, the planning, had all been a dance set up by his hated brother-in-law, Salvatore, simply to protect the gold. He looked across the water at Gio, who was now swimming toward a small, dark rock, the copper key still clutched in his hand. Gio! Vito screamed. I have your sister's life and your empire in my hands. Get the code from the girl. Tell me the format. Now. Gio reached the rock, pulling himself out of the freezing water. He looked at Vito, then at Ilara, realizing the full, terrifying weight of the situation. He held the key, Ilara had the date, and Vito had the vengeance. But Gio, dripping and broken, finally looked like a man who was ready to lead. He looked at Ilara, his eyes narrowed, the emotional commitment clear. The format is WMDD, Gio yelled, his voice echoing across the dark water. And you have 1 second, Vito. Let her go. Vito roared in triumph. I have it. I have the code. He shoved Ilara violently toward the scorpion boat. Take her. She's yours. As Ilara flew across the water, Gio didn't watch her. He looked at the scorpion leader's boat and pulled his last defense, the small, silver stiletto Ilara had given him. He had learned from her. He threw the stiletto with a practiced, military arc. It didn't aim at the people. It aimed at the engine control box on the scorpion boat. The stiletto struck true, causing a shower of sparks and a sudden, massive explosion of the engine block. The scorpion boat burst into flames, sinking instantly. Vito, distracted by his code and his triumph, stared in horror at the chaos. He had the code, but his leverage was gone, and his enemies were sinking. Ilara is thrown toward the scorpion boat, but Gio's last-second action, destroying the scorpion leader's boat, sinks his greatest enemies but leaves Ilara once again abandoned in the freezing water, inches from an escalating gunfight between Vito and the remaining scorpions, with the real Anya still hidden on the island. Ilara hit the cold, churning water, the impact stealing her breath. She didn't struggle. She watched the chaos erupt around Vito's yacht. Gio's flare had done its job. The scorpion leader's boat was sinking, but the remaining 3 scorpion boats immediately turned their guns on Vito's vessel. Traitor! Vito screamed, aiming his hunting rifle not at the enemy, but at the place where Gio was hiding on the rock. Gio knew this was the end of the line. He had the copper key, he had the date, and he knew the location of the vault. But he was alone, facing his vengeful uncle and a swarm of professional assassins. He was about to be hunted down. Suddenly, a massive, dark shape sliced through the water toward Vito's yacht. It wasn't a boat. It was a massive, old-style fishing trawler, its nets trailing, its engine roaring like an enraged bull. Standing on the deck, outlined by the yacht spotlights, was Emilio, the chef. He held no rifle, just a boat, and his face was a mask of cold, righteous vengeance. Emilio steered his trawler directly into the flank of Vito's yacht. The collision was catastrophic. The smaller yacht was ripped open with a grinding screech of metal. Vito and his remaining men were thrown overboard into the freezing water. Emilio, his eyes fixed on the chaos, had achieved his final act of vengeance against the men who used his wife. In the confusion, Ilara surfaced, grabbing onto a piece of floating wreckage. She saw Emilio jump from the sinking trawler. Emilio! Ilara yelled, swimming toward him. The code is on Vito. He has the number. Gio knows the format. Emilio grabbed a piece of wood and used it to paddle toward the struggling Vito. Vito was screaming, not from the cold, but from the realization that his plan, his life, had been destroyed by his sister's grieving husband. You took her from me. Emilio roared, closing the distance. Now I take everything from you. Emilio slammed the piece of wood down, hitting Vito hard on the head. Vito went limp, sinking beneath the waves. Ilara swam frantically to the spot. He needs to live, Emilio. The final key. We need him. Emilio looked at Ilara, his eyes hollowed out by years of grief. He dies. Isadora. This ends now. Suddenly, Gio appeared, having swum from the rock. He tackled Emilio, pulling him away from the spot where Vito sank. Stop! Gio yelled, his voice strained. He has the code. If he dies, the gold dies. Anya dies. Ilara saw the pure desperation in Gio's eyes. He wasn't fighting for the gold anymore, he was fighting for the one remaining piece of his family, his half-sister, Anya. He had changed. Ilara swam quickly to the sinking Vito, pulling his unconscious body back to the surface. Emilio, watching the daughter of his dead wife save the man who ruined her life, let his arms drop in defeat. The vengeance was too heavy a burden for him to hold. Together, the three, the Mafia boss, the chef, and the double agent, dragged Vito to a piece of floating debris. They landed on the isolated shore of Isola dei Silenzi. They were bruised, freezing, and exhausted. Vito was unconscious. The monastery, Ilara gasped, pointing up the steep hill. Anya is there. And the vault. Gio and Ilara helped the devastated Emilio up the hill. They found the monastery, a small, crumbling stone structure, seemingly abandoned. Inside, hidden beneath a rotting altar, they found the entrance to the vault, a massive, rusted steel door with 3 keypads. The final sequence, Emilio whispered, pointing to the door. 3 codes. Keypad 1, Salvatore's date of birth. Keypad 1, key code from Luca's records. Keypad 2, Anya Rossi. Keypad 2, account name from Ilara's files. And keypad 3, Vito's code. Keypad 3, the date Ilara revealed. Gio looked at the copper key in his hand. He realized the truth, the key wasn't for the vault. It was a decoy, meant to draw the fire. The 3 keypads were the legacy. They entered the first 2 codes, which they already knew. The 3rd keypad required Vito's code, the 10th of October, 1975. Emilio looked at the keypad, then at Ilara. If we open this, the gold is ours. We can start a new life, Isadora. Gio looked at the gold vault, then at the keypads. He knew the format. He could betray them and take the gold, ending the cycle of violence. But he looked at Ilara, shivering, exhausted, but alive. No, Gio said, shaking his head. We don't open it. Ilara and Emilio stared at him in shock. The scorpion will come back, Gio said, his voice raw with exhaustion and a new kind of resolve. Vito is breathing. The gold will only bring more violence. It killed my father, it killed your mother, Emilio. It will kill us all. He looked at Ilara, his eyes begging for understanding. The power isn't in the gold, Ilara. It's in the life we save. He threw the copper key onto the cold stone floor. We find Anya, Gio stated firmly. We take her and we leave. We leave the gold, we leave the city, we leave the life. This was the heartbreaking sacrifice. Gio, the Mafia boss, was willingly turning his back on billions to save his half-sister and protect the woman he loved. He had gone from a predator seeking control to a protector seeking peace. Emilio stared at the vault, the dream of vengeance and wealth dying in his eyes. He looked at Ilara, who was watching Gio with a mixture of disbelief and love. Go, Emilio whispered, finally dropping his burden. Find your sister, Gio. Live the life my wife should have had. They found Anya Rossi hidden in a small, damp room in the old monastery's bell tower. She was small, with white blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, the exact girl from the photograph. She was terrified, but alive. Gio knelt before her, tears finally streaming down his face, the physical reaction of overwhelming relief and pain. Anya, he choked out, reaching for her. I'm your brother, Giovanni. We're going home. Ilara watched the genuine, raw emotion. She realized that the insult in the restaurant, the humiliation she inflicted, had not just sparked a war. It had stripped Gio down to his core, forcing him to choose humanity over power. As they left the monastery, Ilara stopped Gio at the top of the hill, looking down at the wreckage of the yachts and the calm, silent sea. You gave up everything, Ilara whispered, the relief making her tremble. Gio turned to her, his face smeared with dirt and tears. He was broken, defeated, but finally free. You taught me that power isn't owning people, Ilara, Gio confessed, his voice thick with shame and a deep, unshakable love. It's owning yourself. You took my city, you took my reputation, and you took my rage. He dropped to his knees in the dust, the ultimate position of surrender. You own me, Isadora, Gio said, looking up at her, begging for mercy not from a superior, but from the woman who held his soul. I beg you. Stay with me. Be my life. Be my justice. Ilara knelt, placing her hand gently on his dirt-streaked face. You don't need my mercy, Giovanni, Ilara said, the final act of vengeance complete. You earned your own forgiveness. She pulled him into a fierce embrace, a journey from crying to smiling, where the ultimate prize wasn't the gold, but the possibility of a normal life built on justice and love. They walked down the hill toward the coastline, Gio carrying his half-sister, Anya, and Ilara supporting Gio. The gold remained locked in the silent monastery, a tombstone for the Mafia life they left behind. Hope, justice, and love had won. If you made it this far, you know how intense this story was. Subscribe for more stories like this. We post 3 times a week, and we'll see you in the next one.